Alright, yes, before any of you make that joke, it is water. Alright, I shatter that illusion. I drink out of a glass bottle sometimes because I'm really bad at drinking water, and if it's in glass then it makes it a bit more fun. I actually do it. Good morning everyone. I say good morning. It's actually very much afternoon here. It is 5:15. I was going to record this morning at a meeting, and so I'm recording in the afternoon, but it's still getting to you in the morning, and that's what counts. We are in Luke chapter 9 today. I was going to say we're kicking it off, but we're not. You can tell I'm off my rhythm when I start these in the afternoon, can't I? We are in Luke chapter 9. We're going from verse 7. We only did 6 verses yesterday, but we got a lot out of those 6 verses. And so let's see what we get out of this next set of verses, next couple of passages. So let's just jump into it. Luke chapter 9, verse 7. Let's go. Now Herod the Tetrarch heard about all that was happening, and he was perplexed. So you remember Herod? He's the baddie. He's the big bad king. He's not technically a king, he's a tetrarch, but he's basically the king for all intents and purposes of the region. And he's not very happy with Jesus. You remember he executed John the Baptist, and now he's hearing about what Jesus did. Yesterday we talked about Jesus sending out the 12 disciples to go minister to people, heal people, do that kind of thing. And so word of all these events, all these happenings, will be heading back to Herod, and he's not best pleased. And he was perplexed, because it was said by some that John had been raised from the dead. John the Baptist, he cut his head off. Some people were saying John the Baptist was back from the dead and was the one doing these miracles. By some, that Elijah had appeared. So other people were saying Elijah's appeared. He was an Old Testament figurehead. And by others, that one of the prophets of old had risen. Herod said, "John I beheaded, but who is this about whom I hear such things?" And he sought to see him. So Herod's found out about what's going on. He's heard rumblings about it, and he's not very happy. So he's going to try and discover what's happening. But that's just a little interlude. That's where we leave that for now, because we're jumping back to what Jesus is doing. So let's have a read. On their return, the apostles told Jesus all that they had done, and he took them and withdrew to a town called Bethsaida. So the 12 guys, his 12 disciples, 12 apostles, 12 followers, those terms are kind of used interchangeably in this passage. Those guys all come back to Jesus. They've all returned from the little missions that he sent them out on, where he said, take no food, no money, no bags, no staff, anything. Just go and spread the word and heal people. With my power and my authority, they've gone out, they've done that, they've come back, and here they are. And Jesus withdrew with them to this small little town called Bethsaida, where they're going to be spending some time together, just having a little bit of community, a little bit of peace and quiet. But when the crowd learned it, they followed him. So the crowd that's been following Jesus, they discover where Jesus has gone, and they're like, alright, cool, we're going there as well, and they follow. And Jesus, rather than getting annoyed at them, it says here, and he welcomed them and spoke to them of the kingdom of God and cured those who needed healing. So Jesus still has time for these people. Just because he went to spend time with his disciples doesn't mean he doesn't want to see the crowd still, which is really cool. Now the day began to wear away. So Jesus has spent the day healing people, teaching to people, ministering to them. But now the day began to wear away. And the 12 came and said to him, "Send the crowd away to go into the surrounding villages and countryside to find lodgings and get provisions, for we are here in a desolate place." But Jesus said to them, "You give them something to eat." They said, "We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we are to go and buy food for all these people, for there are about 5,000 men." But Jesus said to his disciples, "Have them sit down in groups of about 50 each." And they did so, and had them all sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, Jesus looked up to heaven and said a blessing over them. And then he broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the crowd. And they all ate and were satisfied. And what was left over was picked up, 12 baskets of broken pieces. So that's a big famous story. It's the feeding of the 5,000. It's quite interesting that it's a story that starts off with Jesus trying to spend a bit of quiet time with some of his disciples and find out what they've been doing, learn about these stories. and then suddenly there's 5,000 people, and that's just it says 5,000 men. We know that there were women following as well, and there probably would have been a few children around as well. So that crowd is actually much, much larger than 5,000. It's a huge, huge crowd. And so can you imagine trying to sort of chat to your 12 mates, find out what they've been up to for the last couple of weeks, and suddenly this huge crowd is here and they all want to spend time with you. But we see Jesus doesn't send these people away. It would be so easy for all of us to be in that situation and just go, okay, I don't want to deal with all these people right now. I'm just going to tell them to go and find their own place, go and find your own food, give me a bit of peace and quiet, and I can just chill and have a quiet evening. But no, Jesus is like, all right, you guys all stay here. I'll cure you. I'll cure your illnesses. I'll, teach you the kingdom of heaven. It's really interesting that the mission that Jesus sends his followers out on is to teach people about the kingdom of heaven and to heal diseases. And then this crowd arrives and Jesus just does that to this crowd. It shows that the purpose that Jesus gave to his disciples wasn't different to the purpose that he had at this point in his ministry. Now, obviously, Jesus goes on to then die for our sins and other things, so he sort of does his own thing later. But the core of what Jesus was doing during his time on earth, he was actually saying, no, you, my followers, you should be doing this too. I will give you the authority and the power to actually go out and do this stuff. And so Jesus shows, by spending time with these 5,000 people and by letting them stay and feeding them all, he shows that, he isn't a God who's like, okay, cool, you've had your 5 minutes with me, now go and have some, go and give me some peace and quiet. Jesus actually sits down with all these people and spends real time with them. And he makes the practicalities work around his vision. I think that's one of the interesting things, is they only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. They don't have very much resources at all. But Jesus is like, you know what, I want these people to stay, and so I'm going to make that work. I'm going to perform a miracle to make the practicalities fit with what my desire is. He doesn't God doesn't ever condense down what his vision is, what his plan is for the practicalities that are there. He doesn't funnel it through that. He gives us the practicalities to accomplish what his vision is. Even if that's just 5 loaves and 2 fish, he will make that stretch to feed over 5,000 people, which is really cool. Yeah, I really love that. And the fact that they have 12 baskets of broken pieces at the end is just like, it's just like the cherry on top. I feel like God does that sometimes, where he'll perform a miracle and then right then he's like, oh, and just so you're aware that this is a miracle, I didn't provide just enough for all these people, I provided plenty of extra. So just so you're certain that this was done by me, here's this final little piece of the puzzle. And yeah, so I guess one of the nice challenges from this is it's a challenge that we've definitely had before, but are you sort of giving God alone time? I know that we sometimes give ourselves alone time from God. We sometimes step back and say, oh, not today, I won't read my Bible today, I won't pray today, I won't deal with that, because I'll just have a quiet morning and I'll just do my own thing. But actually, there are times also where we give God alone time, where we say, oh, God doesn't need to know about this, God doesn't need to deal with me right now, I can handle this on my own. Like, I can, if we were one of these people in the story, that's the equivalent of saying, oh, well, I can just go to the nearby towns, to the nearby countryside, I'll find my own lodging, I'll get my own food, it's fine, God, don't worry about it, I'll just leave you to do your thing, I'll just go and look after myself and sort myself. But we have a God who doesn't want that. We have a God who wants to spend time with us, who wants to feed us, who wants to provide for us, who wants to help us. It's so interesting that this account comes directly after Jesus sending out the 12 disciples, because he sends them out and says, don't take any food with you, don't take any provisions with you, just rely on me. And then immediately after that we get a story of how God miraculously uses what little things we have, what little practicalities we have to sustain us and support us in a very real way. He's not, this isn't like, I know there are healings and there's teaching that happens in the story, but at the end of the day, the big miracle here is that he's just feeding people. He's just giving people enough food to eat. And so when we're looking at miracles in our own lives, sometimes that miracle doesn't mean everything's transformed and changed and is, completely radically different. Sometimes it's just like, oh, we had this problem and God just stepped in and provided for us, and God just stepped in and supported us. And so, yeah, that's challenge number 2 today. Challenge number 1, are you giving God alone time? Because he doesn't want it. He wants time with you. He wants quality time with you, not alone time. And challenge number 2, Are you relying on God in the practicalities? When you've got a crowd of 5,000 people and just a couple of loaves of bread and some fish, are you relying on God to actually make that stretch to the whole group? Because if you are, then he will do so. All it needs is a little bit of faith, and God comes through and does what he says he will. He makes the practicalities fit his vision. He doesn't fit his vision to the practicalities. So we'll leave it there today. Wonderful to see you. I mean, I don't see you technically, but wonderful for you to see me, which just sounds really vain and horrible, so I won't say that at all. It's been wonderful. And we'll leave things there. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow. Much love.